Morning, gentlemen. Let's see where we got up to. Oh, sorry. So I think we're on Nun Aleph Amid Beis, are we not?
Yeah, we just have the last 4 words on.
Ketzad?
Just on Nun Aleph Amid Aleph.
Amid Aleph.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
There
it is. Umidragam Gamliel Sover Ein Zika. So last thing we discussed was that Rav Gamliel holds Ein Zika, that we said that the Zika of Yibum is not so strong, and therefore we're not going to differentiate between a Yevamot that's Ru'uyel Yibum and a Yevamot that's Ein Ru'uyel Yibum. One Chalitza will pater both the first Yevamot and the second Yevamot Hatzara, and therefore we're going to derive from that here on the top of Nun Aleph Amid Beis that Rabbanan Tzavri Yesh Zika. The Rabbanan hold Yesh Zika, and we said that therefore, according to the Rabbanan, because of Yesh Zika, the Tzara is Eina Nifteres v'Chalitzas Harishon. So we need 2 Chalitzas. Again, the Gemara's logic is that once we clarify that according to the Shita Ram Gamliel ain't Zika, that's why ain't get liachar get. Therefore, according to the Chachamim, yesh Zika. So in a sense, the Gemara is going to point out that the implications of this machlokas go way beyond the actual official explicit issue that they're addressing. Even beyond that, there might be implications as far as Zika is concerned. Okay, then, so that's Yesh Zika according to the Chachamim. And the Machlokes is not only with regard to Get Achar Get and so forth, or Maimer HaMaimer, but also with regard to Yesh Zika or Ein Zika. Uktani Seifa, I guess you read it, nevertheless, it says in the Seifa of this price, so it says, V'cheinata Omer, that same machlokes, in the case of 2 Yevamos, right? There was 1 Yavam and 2 Yevamos, and the Yavam gave a get to the first Yevama and a get to the second Yevama. Now the Brisa says in the Seifa, V'chein b'shnei Yevamim v'Yevama achas. When you have Shimon and Levi, and Reuven, the late Reuven, was only married to Rachel. And just like when there's 1 Yavam and 2 Yevamos, all you need is what? 1 Chalitza, right? That's what we said. If in a case where there was 1 Yavam and he gave a get to 2 Yevamos, okay, each Yavam will need a get, but as far as Chalitza is concerned, 1 Chalitza would be effective for both of them. So too in the case of 2 Yevamim, right, where you have Shimon and Levi, and each one gave a get to this 1 single Yevama by the name of Rachel, 1 Chalitza is enough. Correct? I mean, there's only 1 Yevama, so obviously 1 Chalitza is enough. And that means that even though the Chalitza is a Chalitza Psula, because a Chalitza after a get is always called a Chalitza Psula, nevertheless, it is a valid Chalitza. Is Levi Tevi Tufta, the Rabbi Barahuna Rav, the Omer Rabbi Barahuna Rav, Chalitza Psula, Tzricha Lachza Kol Ha'achim. So we're talking about Shimon and Levi, And the question is, does Levi have to give an additional chalitza to Rachel, or is it sufficient that Shimon gave chalitza to Rachel? We said that it's good enough, even though it's a chalitza psula, for Shimon to give a chalitza. We don't need that all the brothers have to give a chalitza. And how does this shtim with Rav Huna Marav, who says that whenever you have a chalitza psula, then she needs chalitza from each one of them in order to be matar to get married. And now you're holding, according to the Rabbanon, yesh zika. And if you're holding yesh zika, then if the chalitza is eina ru'il liyibo, then the chalitza is not effective enough, because it's a chalitza psula, to be mafkia the zika of yibo. Because again, we're saying that the zika is a very strong zika, and you need a first-class, full-fledged chalitza, healthy chalitza, in order to undermine and neutralize the zika. You can't do that with the chalitza psula. And our case here is a case of chalitza psula, because the chalitza was given after the get. So is there a way of reconciling Chachamim sheet of yesh zika, where the Chachamim, nevertheless, despite the fact that it's a chalitza psula, they suffice with one chalitza, whereas Rabba Bar of Huna, I should say, in the name of Rav, says that when you have a chalitza psula after a get, you need a chalitza from each one of the Yevamim. So we don't want to have a situation here where Rav is going against the Chachamim. Rav is quoted by Rabbi Bar of Huna. Amulcha Rabbi Bar of Huna, I can reconcile this apparent contradiction from the Chachamim on Rav. Right? And we're saying now that yesh zika. Bein l'Rab Gamliel, bein l'Rab Banan Savri ein zika. Now I'm going to say, just one second, that bein l'Rab Gamliel, bein l'Rab Banan is ein zika. So now Rabbi Bar Huna is reinterpreting the machlokas Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanan, and even the Rabbanan hold ein zika. So one second. Oh yeah, if you hold yesh zika, then you require a double chalitza, right? Why is it that each one of the achim has to give his own individual chalitza? It's not enough for one brother to give chalitza. And the answer is because yesh zika. And a chalitza psula is not strong enough to undermine a full-fledged zika. But now we're going to say that both Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbanan hold ein zika. Again, we're going to have to explain what the machlokus is all about, but they all agree that ein zika. If they all agree that ein zika, that's why even the Rabbanan would agree that one chalitza on the part of one of the brothers, one of the Yevamim, is sufficient, and you don't need a second chalitza, because we're holding now ein zika. It was only because yesh zika, and the zika is so powerful that in the case of a zika psula after a get, we required another chalitza from the other Yavam, but now we're holding ein zika, which means like ki'ilu with a puff, you can get rid of the zika. And therefore it's enough to have one chalitza, despite the fact that the chalitza is a chalitza psula. So that would mean that Rav Huna, Rabbi Bar of Huna, the name of Rav, of chalitza psula, torch lachzor ala achim, that's based on a different shita. And that's the shita of yesh zika. The Rabbanon, and certainly it goes without saying Rabbi Gamliel, they hold ein zika. Okay, so now what is the machlok between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabban? Hacha begerach hargeru maimar chamaimar pligi komifligi. In other words, the Chachamim recognize the efficacy, so to speak, of the get, even though the Torah doesn't recognize the get in the case of Yevama, of Zikas Yivu. The Chachamim, in effect, made a takana to recognize the get, and not only that, according to the Shitas Chachamim of Rabbi Gamliel, the Chachamim even recognize the power of the Yavam to give more than one get, which is called get liachar get. That's according to the Chachamim. Rabbi Gamliel holds that if there's a bias that needs yivu, then there's one maimar and there's one get. Right? We're not going to give credence or power or a koach for all the yavamim to achieve a get, meaning a get liachar get, or a maimar liachar maimar. And that's the shita of Rabbi Gamliel. Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Gamliel. They gave a koach, a power, to each one of the yavamim to either be koneh with a kinyan d'Rabbana called maimar, or to be doche with a get. And therefore, if each yavam, or in a case where there's one yavam and many yavamos, we have again that koach over and over again of get liachar get and maimar liachar maimar. That's the shita of the Chachamim. But they're all agreeing, and the machlokas does not revolve around zika. They're all agreeing that ain't zika. And if ain't zika, there's no need for more than one chalitza. So I think you have to add here, I don't know, he doesn't say anything about this, but you have to add here the other point that according to Rabbi Bar Avuna, in the name of Rav, why do we need tzricha latza al kol ha'achir? And the answer is because yesh zika. Has nothing to do with the machlokas from Gamliel Rabbana. They're arguing that whether the Chachamim, I don't mean Chachamim from Gamliel, I mean the Chachamim in general, right? The Rabbanon in general, when they gave koach for a person to create a kinyan or a dechia, did they give it to, it's a one-time deal, which means one yavam, not the other yavam, that's from Gamliel, or one-shot deal of that one single yavam, and he can't do another get or another maimar? Or do we say, no, the Chachamim made this takana, and they recognized the ability of the Yavam. They granted him, shall we say, the legal authority to create a maimar after a maimar, or a get after a get, for each Yavama, or for each Yavam vis-a-vis, right, for each Yavam vis-a-vis the one single Yavama, or for the one Yavama vis-a-vis all the Yavama. Okay, so this piece that we did now is kind of a hashlama, just to finish up what we discussed yesterday. And now, let's focus on the Shita Rabbi Gamliel. What happens? Let's say there's a case of one Yavam and two Yavamos, and he gives maimar to each one of the Yavamos. We said that according to Rabbi Gamliel, the first maimar to the first Yevama is effective midrabbanon, and it generates an Isra on har krovos. But as far as the second maimar on the second Yevama, we're going to apply the principle of Rabbi Gamliel of ein maimar achar maimar. So who's going to give a chalitza? It's the Rishona, the first one, who's going to get chalitza, or gerichin, right? In order to limit the Isser b'krovosel, and then we don't have to apply, the derabana, the Isser derabana of krovas chalutzosa to the shnia. Omar Mar asa maimar bizu, umaimar bizu. We're talking about one yavam and two yavamos, and that yavam gave maimar to both of these two yavamos. Rabbi Gamliel Omer no say get l'rishona v'cholitzli. We're going to recognize the first maimar and therefore she'll need a get. We will not recognize the second mimer, so the other Yevama, that sort, does not need a get. The first Yevama is going to receive chalitza. And that chalitza will generate a hetel shuk for the other Yevama as well. So after he gives chalitza to Rachel, then also b'krovoseh, he can't marry any of Rachel's relatives because of Grushaso and Chalutzaso. We said this is a double header. It's both Grusha and Chalutza. Because as a result of the Maimar, she needs a get, and she also needs Chalitza because of the Zikas Yibum. And either one of those, whether it's the get or the Chalitza, would be enough to generate an Isa B'krovoseh. But Mutta B'krovot Shniya. Why? Because we're not recognizing the Maimar to the Shniya because ain't Maimar Achar Maimar. So therefore she doesn't need a get. And the Chalitza is given only to Rachel and not to the second, right, the Shniya, that's Leah. So she received neither get nor Chalitza. And therefore he's mutter b'krovoseh. So the Gemara asks the following question. Michti. Savar Rabbi Gamliel ein maimar achar maimar. Why does Rabbi Gamliel insist that no saying get l'rishona v'cholis? Meaning, there's only one option according to Rabbi Gamliel vis-a-vis the first Yevamot. And that is to remove the issues. What does that mean, remove the issues? Either chalitza to remove the issues of Zika, or gerushin to remove the issues to Rabbanan of Maimah. But Yibum is not an option. Is Rishona Nami Tisyamim? What's the Gemara's question? The Gemara is asking the following. You could say that the Maimar to the Rishona generates an Isur Yibum to the Shniya. But that doesn't generate an Isur, that doesn't block Yibum for the Rishona. What should block Yibum for the Rishona is the Maimar to the Shniya. But Rabbi Gamliel doesn't recognize the Maimar to the Shniya because ain't Maimar Achar Maimar. So why can't he be Miyabim the Rishona? What's the logic here that compels Rabbi Gamliel to the conclusion that as far as the Rishona, give her a get, give her a chalitza, but Yibum is not an option? Why not? The second Maimar is not a valid Maimar. There must be some logically compelling reason why Rabbi Gamliel blocks Maimar to the Rishon. Gzeira, the Gemara answers that the Rabbana made Gzeira to prohibit Yibum to the Rishona because Dilma Asi Liyabume Lishnia. I guess it means that if he thinks he can be Miyabim the Rishona, he also thinks he can be Miyabim the Shnia. Now, what's so terrible about being Miyabim the Shnia? The answer is that the Maimar to the Rishona generates an Isur Yibum to the Shnia. In other words, we recognize the Maimar to the Rishona as if he was Miyabim her on a Drabbana level. So if we're going to allow Yibum to the Rishona, then the spectator is going to think that to the same extent you allowed Yibum to the Rishon, he's also allowed, he's permitted to be Miyabim the Shniya. Now again, let's just review it. Why is he enjoined from Miyabim the Shniya? And the answer is because the Torah says, Bayis echad yivne v'lo yivne shnei batim. He's not allowed to be Miyabim both Yevamas. Now, since he did Maimar to the Rishon, and the Rabbanan are recognizing that Maimar, so that Maimar is like a Yibum. He's created issues. And then he can't be Miyabim the Shniya because that would be a violation of Shnei Batim. I mean, the only thing that bothers me here is why isn't that gzera l'gzera? Meaning, there's one gzera that he's not allowed to be miyabim the shnia. What's the reason for that? Because the Rabbanah are recognizing the Maimar, meaning the Maimar of the Rishona. And now you're telling me that if we would allow Yibum to the Rishona, they might come to be miyabim the shnia. I know that to me is gzera l'gzera. I don't know why in this whole sugya it was never mentioned gzera l'gzera. You want to see, Jeff, maybe by chance he says anything that I doubted.
So when he does Maimar to the first one, it's a Gezerah that he can't marry?
Correct, because the Torah doesn't recognize Maimar. So that Maimar is nothing. The Rabbanah is saying it looks like Yibum. He's created Ishus Kaviyot. And once he creates Ishus, then we have the principle of Bayis Echad V'lo Shnei Bat. Fine. Now you're telling me he can't be Miyabi the Rishon. Why? Because he gave her a Maimar? That's not logically compelling that he can't be Miyabi. You swung around second base. Why not go around all the bases? Finish the job. But the answer is because then they might come to allow Yibum to the Shnia. But Yibum to the Shnia itself is only because of the Maimar to Rishona, which is the Rabban.
So I think
that's the bothers me. It's Gzera
I
Achas.
think it's the same as it.
Let's think about that. So we don't want him to be Miyam Shnei Bat, and if well, I see what you're saying.
Because you're trying to avoid
the Shnei Bat.
Yeah. I mean,
so he can't marry. Wait just a second. Can't marry the second one because the Shnei Bat. So now we're going to say that in order to make, how should I say, teeth, to give teeth to this Gzera. Just 1 second. Why is the Shnei Bat? It's only Shnei Bat because you recognize the Maimar of the Rishon. So what do you? But today it comes down to the Easter of. No. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, Steve. I'll tell you what. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I mean the giving Maimar, and then you're saying the Gezerah is he can't marry the second.
The second.
Then he can't marry the first because if he could marry the first, he might come to a mistake and marry the second. So both of them are about not being able to marry the second.
Right. So that's what I wanted to tell you. Maybe you're right, but let's go through it. I want to go through the step-by-step logical process. Like the Gemara says that you can't put meat and milk on the same table because you might come to eat them together. So the Gemara says, so what? What if he eats them together? Oh, then he might come to cook them together. So the Gemara says that's Gzera l'Gzera. In other words, if I prohibit you to do X because it might come to Y and Y itself is Gzera, then right? Because Y itself is mutter. Again, it sounds strange to our ears, but you're allowed to eat meat and milk together. You can't cook them together and then eat them together. And then to say that, therefore, I can't put them on the same table together, that's already Gzera l'Gzera. So 1 second. So what am I trying to say? That we'll start with the Shnia. So, we don't want you to be miyabim the Shnia because you did a Maimar to the Rishon, and it looks like you're like getting all the Yevamot, right? But now to tell me that therefore I can't be miyabim the Rishon, that's Gzera l'Gzera. So you're answering. Then now I want to make sense out of your answer that it's kula chad gzera. It's all one gzera. Why? Because the Torah says not to marry two bat. Right? You have one bias and not two bat. So we have to figure out the Rabbanan are going to institute all different methods that will be marchik us and prevent us from violating the shnei bat. So whatever they have to do, even if it's a whole Chagadi, in order to, so that's what I think the Gemara says. I have to look it up again in Chulin. John, we learned this together, if you remember, up in the second floor of the Shtibla, if you remember those good old days. Remember when the rain used to come down? Okay. Anyway, so we learned the Gemara in Chulin. I think the Gemara in Chulin says that you're not allowed to put milk on the same table. Again, there are all sorts of different dinim. I'm not going through all the nuances, because it might lead to something that will ultimately lead to basa b'chol. And that's called kulachad exer. So, like you say, whatever we start back, we move backwards. Whatever has to, there's the end goal, and whatever we have to avoid at the end goal, whatever we have to do to guarantee that we won't come to the end goal, that's kulachad exer. But let's say you had two different zeras for two different isurim, and then you would pile one on top of the other. That would be, so 1 second, how does, that would be zera l'zera. 1 second, does that have anything to do with krovas chalutzaso? And let's just, krovas chalutzaso is xera otu grusha, right? And shnios is a whole different xera. That's what the Gemara was clearing about. But again, my problem is, as I shared it with you many times, is that nowhere does the Gemara mention Gzeira l'Gzeira. I don't know why. It would seem that the whole issue of Otz Chalutzasa, in a case of, a great nephew or something like that, is because, we don't know if the Rabbanu went that far when they instituted the Gzeira of Krovas Chalutzasa, which is similar to Krovas Grusha. Now you want to talk about Shnius Larais. I mean, Shnius Larais is a totally different Xer. That's a different ballgame. If you marry your great niece, you might marry your niece, whatever it might be. But that's an Arayas home. That's not a halach of Chalutza and Grusha. I don't know why that still remains a question in my mind. Okay, so now we're up to Rabbi Yochanan, am I right? Okay. So we've had this concept called Kinyan Gomer in the past. So we'll have a challenge here to try to remember what Kinyan Gomer means. Because Rabbi Yochanan now is going to give a list of Tanoim. He's got 4 different Tanoim. We're going to go through the proofs for each one of these 4 Tanoim that they all hold that Maimer is a Kinyan Gomer. Now, I'm not sure why this Gemara appears here. Let's just think. There's got to be some logical connection between the Rav Yochanan that we're about to study and the Gemara of Rav Gamliel and the Chacham. Let's just think. If the Chacham would hold... Oh. Hmm. 1 second. I think it works like this. Let me bounce something off you and tell me if this makes sense. What did the Rabbanan do when they validated Maimer? The Torah doesn't validate Maimer, but the Rabbanan did. Did the Rabbanan equate Maimer with Yibum, and it's a valid alternative, again, midrabanan, to creating ishus. That would be called a kinyan gom. So from the perspective of Rav Gamliel, that's exactly what happened. The Rabbanan gave full backing to Maimar, recognizing it and validating it to such an extent that there's no possibility of another Maimar. It's like I would come over to a married woman and give her kesef and shtar. It's meaningless. She's already married. But the Chachamim of Rav Gamliel, they said, Yesh Maimar Acham Maimar. And we're going to recognize and validate the Maimar of Levi vis-a-vis Rachel, or of Shimon vis-a-vis Leah, if you follow me, right? So it means that the Chachamim see Maimar as a kind of mixas kinyan. It leaves a little bit of an open space for another Maimar. And what Rabbi Yochanan is going to try to prove now is that there are 4 shitos in the Tanoim. Each one has his own, ruling. And the underlying common denominator of all these 4 shitos is that once the Rabbanan recognized Maimar, they went all the way. Maimar is a full kinyan. And sure enough, the first one on the list is Rabbi Gamliel. That we know, because Rabbi Gamliel holds Maimar equals kinyan gomor, and therefore ein Maimar acham Maimar. There's no room, there's no space for a second Maimar. Ubeit Shammai, okay, that we don't know. Rab Shimon, it's 5 times. Rab Shimon, Uben Azai, V'Rabbi Nechem. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kulu Sfirulu Maimar Kona Kinyan Gomor, and Rab Gamliel Hadamor. So that's the connection here to the suit. Beit Shammai, where does Beit Shammai hold that Maimar is a Kinyan Gomor? This we had once, but it was so long ago we probably forgot it. And it says Shlosha Achim. So you have 3 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. So let's say that Reuven married. Let's say Reuven married Rachel, and Shimon married Leah. And for some reason, I'm taking a peek at this diagram. I don't know if this is the relevant diagram. Of Mem. Yeah, I think he's saying that, I don't know why, that Reuven married Leah and Shimon married Rachel. Okay, fine. Now we have a third brother named Levi. So Levi, I don't know if he's married or he's not married, it's irrelevant, but he's certainly not married to one of the sisters here, Rachel and Leah. So now what happens is, he says actually Echad Muf. All right, I'm not sure why he has to say that. No, I'm saying, why did the Mishnah, he's quoting a Mishnah, but why did the Mishnah have to say Echad Muf? Okay, that's a way of expressing the fact that he's not married to a sister. Mufta means he's panui, he's not married at all. But I don't think it'll make any difference here. All right. Now what happens? Meis echad mibale ha'achos. So let's say that Reuven died, and we said that Reuven was married to Rachel. That's his. No, I'm sorry. What does he have here? He says Nasa Reuven es Rachel. Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, I'm sorry. So Reuven marries Rachel and Shimon marries Leah. Reuven dies, and his wife Rachel falls for Yibum to Levi. Right? She cannot fall for Yibum to Shimon because Shimon is married to what's her name? To Leah, right? We said to Leah. So that's Achos Ishta. But she, the wife of Reuven, could fall to Levi. Now, what does Levi do? Asaba. Okay. Asaba. Who is this person who's Asaba? That's the Mufne. That's Levi. Maimon. So now we have Levi giving Maimar to Rachel, Ashes Reuven, right? What happens now? The Achach Meis Ochiv Hashem. So now Shimon dies. And Shimon was married, we said, to Leah. So now Leah falls for Yibum to Levi. So Levi had done Maimar to Rachel, Ashes Reuben. Now Leah falls for Yibum to the same Levi. So what's the Shita Beit Shammai? Is Beit Shammai Omrim Ishto vehalazu teitze mishum achos isha. So again, as Beit Shammai is focused on the fact that Levi gave Maimar to Rachel. Okay, now when Ashes Shimon, Leah falls for Yibum, so what's the status of Leah? Leah is now an erva d'Rabbanan of Achos Ishta. Meaning, had Levi been Miyabhem Rachel, then it would be an Achos Ishta Dorais. But Levi was not Miyabhem Rachel. He gave Maimar to Rachel. So do we equate that Maimar with Yibum? And the answer apparently is yes, according to Beit Shammai. Why? Because it says Teitze. Well, how could that be? What does that mean, Teitze? Let's see. Let me just see the note here. He said he has this diagram with a note on the bottom. He says, Kishemes Shimon nifteres Leah min achalitza mishum achos isha. Oh, 1 second. What would that be? I don't get it. Levi did a Maimar with Rachel, and now Leah's falling for Yibum. So therefore, Leah doesn't need Chalitza. She's not. How does that work? I'm missing something. Sorry.
I mean, it'd be a problem if he gave her chalitza, because then he couldn't marry Rachel. There should be a chalitza.
So I'm just going to read the translation. He says, "Ashniya shenofel lefanu min achasheni," which is Leah, right? Teitze linose l'shuk below chalitza v'yimah. Why? Mishum she nechsheves achos isha. Imam Shraitz says, "Shekol shenofel lefanu Yevamot asur alav isakar same bazika sibum klam just doesn't shuk. She doesn't need chalitza. Nimtzasha al af shalo yiven es rishon. Right, all he did was a mimer. Kinyan a mimer shalasaba ona legamre. How does that work? I'm going to throw something out here. I don't know. I don't know how to say it otherwise. I mean, to me, this has to be that Beit Shammai holds that Maimer is Dorais. He says it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very disappointed in the Masechet. Yeah, go ahead. I'm a big fan of the Masechet. That's why I. What does he say?
That's when Shimon dies and his widow, both the lady, she's an Erva, and therefore rejected from Yibam. She does not become Lady Tzkuka. Consequently, Lady Marmar, widow, does not become his own Zukuka. He may keep her as a wife, and Shimon's widow is discharged without Yibam or Chalitza, as explained above. Beit Shammai maintains that Mamar is valid, even biblically. However, even Beit Shammai does not necessarily hold that Mamar affects literally the complete acquisition of Mamar.
I think the last part of your sentence means, if I understand it correctly, that let's say somebody out there in the world would have a relationship with Rachel. Does he get Misa for that? Is that a capital crime? So you're telling me that Maimer is Dorais? So she's an Eshes Ish, I mean, he Bichad Misa? So that's why I think that last part of the sentence, if you read it one more time, however,
even Beit Shammai does not necessarily hold that Mamar affects literally the complete acquisition of the Yevamot.
So again, it's Doraisa,
But
she's not an Ashes each. So somebody would be high. Like, for example, this is a little bit of a strange example, but let's say somebody put a gun at somebody's head and said, if you don't have a relationship with this Rachel, after Levi gave Maimer to Rachel, I'll knock you block. So would it be a Hargal Yav? Okay, very nice, Maimer and this, and Beit Shammai recognize Maimer Dorais, but I don't believe for 1 minute that it's Hargal Yav.
What I'm wondering is, if he did Maimer, and there's another brother born after that. If Levi then died because he hadn't done the deal with her, she wouldn't fall for Yibum to this because he never completed the Yevamot. The Yibum. For all intents and purposes, and she's his wife, but because he wasn't
Again, let me go over this one more time. So Reuven dies, and Shimon gives Maimer to Rachel. Okay, now what happens is there's another brother, but that other brother, let's say, did not have anything to do with Reuven because he was born after Reuven died. So it's Achim Shlomo. But now Levi's along and Kaviochel, according to Beit Shammai, married to Rachel. So now if Levi dies, does Rachel, fall for Yibum to this other brother? So you're saying no, because this is not a full-fledged Ish. In the scale of Ishus, I would wonder how do you define this? It's so ambiguous, amorphous. Where do we find something? I guess Zika is a good address. Where else do we have anything else? No, Erickson already makes it with HC. I don't know enough about this, but was there Yibum in a case of Sota? What was the deal? We discussed this, no? We discussed Sarah Sota. Right, if Reuven is married to Rachel, Rachel becomes a Sota, then Reuven dies, does his Sota wife fall for Yibum? And then we could talk about, Zika in another way. Let's say, for example, someone had a relationship with a Yevamot. Yevamot was shook. So love. So we come down to this. There, everybody is so right. Kiddush of Beit Shammai is Maimon. And it's to this Maimon when Shimon dies and Leah falls to Yibum, she's an Achos Ishta. And she doesn't even need Chalitza. I mean, you see that Beit Shammai is going really very far. And to say that she's Nifteres, Min HaYibum, and a Chalitza, why? Because she's Achos Ishta. And it's almost like he's applying the Erev of Achos Ishta. So, I mean, why don't you go a step further and apply the Erev of Eishes Ish? I don't think for a minute that we're going to do that. Now, I would ask another question. What happens if Levi goes ahead now and he's Miyamim Leah, which he wasn't supposed to do? Would you say Ein Kiddush Tosin Barayas over here? But it's a funny kind of an error because it's Achos Ishto, but it's not really Achos Ishto because it's only a Maimon. And then again, you could ask the other question. Somebody in a shuk would marry her. Is there any validity? Is Keser Shtak, would that be bound? Or she's married to Levi. I mean, you could really have a blast with this. To how to define, there's a Seder Noshim, it's one of the 6 Sidre. How do you define Zikas Yibum according to Beit Shammai in a case of mine? Right? So you started with Zikas Yibum, but again, if you start with Zikas Yibum, the Leah also has a Zikas Yibum when Shimon dies. So both Rachel had a Zikas Yibum through Reuven's death and Leah through Shimon's death. So now Levi is looking at a case of 2 Zikos Yibum to 2 different women from 2 of his brothers. But now there was Maimah with one of them. And Beit Shammai says, as a result of Maimah with one of them, let's say with Rachel, there's no Zikas even to Leah, period. She doesn't even need Chalitza. God. Why? Because the Zika that was upgraded by Maimah. It's like gradations here. Zika itself is one level of an issues for Chayvei Lavim and things like that. Because, Lo Sucha Lios, Achutza Lishzar. And then you upgrade it with Maimah according to Beit Shammai. To the extent in which there's some sort of quasi-erva situation of Eishes of Achos Ishto. Ad Kedei Kach that Achos Ishto removes the Zikas Yibum. It's a very powerful Maimah, this Maimah. Mamish a whole open.
After Maimah, if he has a deal with her, then
that's a full 5 pages.
Right, and it's a
mitzvah Hebrew, or what?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
but that's exactly what we're going to tell him to do.
So there's almost 3 levels. There's Zika, the Maimar, and then
Jeff is you're right. the Rabbi, you hear what Jeff is saying. You really, this is the law of developing issues, right? You started with Zika, you upgraded to Maimar, and then you upgraded to Yibum. Although even before Yibum, she would need a get, and that would apparently be a doraisa, but it would not be a get that removes a full-fledged issues. And that's what we said. It would not be a Hargal Yavar if somebody would have a relationship with her before he did Yibum, meaning after Maimar, even according to Beit Shammai. But yet, paradoxically, it's enough of an issues to generate an erva of achotz ishta, such that now she doesn't have a zikas even. That's going very far, and that's what I wondered if he would go ahead and marry Leah. Would we recognize that marriage to achotz ishta? Because it's not really achotz ishta. It's only Maimon. There's a lot of gray area, gray mass, Okay, who else holds that that Maimer is a Kenyan Gomer? Rab Shimon, Sanya. Right now, here the Masifta has a long introduction to Rabbi Shimon. I'll just summarize it. This is a Mishnah at the end of Masechet Yevamos, and it's a Yavam ben Techa Sheba al Yevimta. So apparently, if I understand correctly, Reuven died and he left two brothers, Shimon and Levi, both of whom are little boys at 9 years old. So Shimon was Miyabem Rachel Ashes Reuven. And Shimon is a Ben Tes. Now what happens is Levi does the same. So what happens here? On the one hand, the Torah recognizes the Bia of a Ben Tes, but on the other hand, he's not capable of kinyanim. So apparently there's some sort of an equation. This is also going to be very challenging to us to understand, between Bias Ben Tes in Yevama and Maimer in Yevama. Nimtza sheyevama zu nechsheves keilu asu ba shnei hayevamim maimer. Okay, so now we go back to Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim. So according to the Chachamim, yesh maimer achar maimer, and therefore yesh bia achar bia. Lefichach hi asur al shneihem, and then we could ask about the krovos. If there are two yevamos. Okay, he's talking about a case where there's only one Yevama. Okay, so that's not relevant. The Maimar called Echad mi Akev al Echav al Achiv liyabma kishiyagdil. So again, if we're equating Bias Ben Tes with Maimar, and we're holding like the Chacham Yesh Maimar Acham Maimar, so she has no possibility of Yibum, neither with this one nor with that one. So that's apparently the Chachamim of this Bryce. Now we get to Rav Shimon. Oh, it's beginning to come back to me a little bit. Do you remember this? I don't remember where we touched on it. So Shimon says that Bias Ben Teisha is a suffix. I have a feeling he means it's like a halachic suffix. It's built into the halach. So we don't know if the Bias Ben Tes is kono or not kono. So what does that mean? If it's only a suffix, then what happens? Oh, so let's try to work this out. Reb Shimon says that Bias Pentes is a suffix. So now, Mimonavshach. On the side that Bias Pentes is Kone, so then the second brother is nothing. And if Bias Pentes is Kone, then both of them are nothing. But the second one cannot be Biabimha because there's a suffix that maybe the Bias Pentes of the first one is Kone, and therefore maybe then therefore on that side he can't be Kone. Amalu Rabbi Shimon L'Chacham in Bias Rishon Bia. Notice he was Kona with Bia because he's a Bentes, and a Bentes' Bia is recognized. Is then Bia Sheni and a Bia. The Bia Rishon and a Bia is also Bia Shnia and a Bia, right? Bia Shnia Nami and a Bia. Bia Bentes, Bentesha, De Kemaimer Shavu Rabot. Why does Reb Shimon have to add that? Oh, maybe this is Reb Yochanan talking. You follow what I mean? I'm going to put a period here after the phrase Bia Sheni Nami and the period. And from now on, it's Reb Yochanan. He's analyzing Reb Shimon. And he says, Veha bias bentesha dikemaimer shavur rabbanon. Uka Amar Rabbi Shimon Eina Bia. Right. So we started with the principle that bias bentesha equals maimer. So whatever you're going to say about bias bentesha, you're going to derive conclusions about maimer. According to Rabbi Shimon, bias bentesha might be considered, according to one side of the suffix, a kinyan gomer, to the extent in which we totally ignore and invalidate the bias sheni. So it means that if bias bentesha is like a maimer, then maimer must be a kinyan gomer. I mean, the only thing that bothers me here, I mean, everything seems to fit into place. I'm uncomfortable about one thing. Reb Shimon's suffix, I would believe, is the right. I'm thinking. Don't you get that intuitive feeling? So again, are we coming back to what we said in Beit Shammai, that Maimer is Dorais? Let's read it again. Bias Mentesha, Kimaimer Shavura. Shavura Bonik. I don't know. It sounds like Kimaimer Shavura Bonon is a Takonis Chacham. You follow me? The language Kimaimer Shavura Bonon indicates that this is a rabbinic institution.
That they equated.
Or the equation is.
I mean,
what are we saying?
The same as Maimer, that's just the Rabbana.
Are we saying that Maimer is Doraisa and Bias Bentesha Midrabanan is like Maimer? Are we saying that Maimer is Doraisa and Midrabanan Bias Bentesha is like Maimer? Or are we saying the exact opposite? That Bias Bentesha is Doraisa on one side and Rav Shimon's Safek, and the Rabbanan gave Maimer that same status. They upgraded it Midrabanan to Bias Bentesha. So we don't have to say that necessarily the Gemara means that Maimer is Doraisa like Beit Shammai. He says Bir Rishona, which I assume he means, let's say, Shimon, who's now a Bentez. Kone Kinyan Gomur. right? According to that side. And therefore, when Levi does a beer, that's nothing, because the beer Rishona of Shimon is a Kinyan Gomer. Al Kain, Gama Maimar, Shemoil Midrabanon. No, he says explicit. But this is not the way we understood Beit Shammai. Is Maimar Shemoil Midrabanon, Kone Kinyan Gomer, because this equation between Bentes, Bias Bentes, and Maimar, Shal Yochel Achar of Maimar Nosaf. Which sounds awfully similar to Ram Gamliel, correct? Ilu haya maimar kone achar maimar is gam ledas Rabbi Shimon oisa bia shnia kone umakeves al rishon liyad. I don't understand this equation between Dorais and Rabbanan makes me very uncomfortable. But just on a technical level, the mechanics, if we just right now we're stopping for more, the mechanics is that if we accept an analogy, then right, the equation between Bias Bentes and Maimer, then obviously Ein Maimer Achar Maimer, which means the first Maimer was a Kinyan Gomer. That's why the second Maimer cannot be effective. And we're going to derive that conclusion from Rabbi Shimon because of the equation between Bias Bentes and Maimer. So just like Rabbi Shimon says that the second Bias Bentes is not valid, it doesn't register because it means that the first Bias Bentes is a Kinyan Gomer on that side in the Safek. So too, in a Maimer Achar Maimer situation, the second Maimer is not valid, doesn't register because the first Maimer is a Kinyan Gomer. So that leads us to Ben Azai. So how far did we get here in Rabbi Yochanan? Let's get the list here. Rabbi Yochanan has Ram Gamliel we covered, Rab Shimon we covered, Rab Beit Shammai we covered, Rab Shimon we covered, and we're up to Ben Azai and Rab Nechem. So we're, I guess, 3/5 of the way there, or something along that line. Okay, then. And then we can do a little bit of Akdama to Need.